The Sony A95L to the left, the LG C1 to the right. The verdict, it's a tie. That's as fast as anyone's going to tell you. We did that in under 10 seconds. So smack a like on the video for spitting it out, not wasting your time, and getting to the dang point. Now, if you want to know why, stay through until the end. We are going to talk about some fine details. Now, before I dive fully into it, please understand that these TVs do not look like this out of the box. They look very, very different. Now, the most important TV to pay very close attention to is the Sony A95L, and that out of the box, it looks way, 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 way worse than what we are dealing with right here. And the point of telling you this is to really drive home the fact that if you are not willing to pay $3,000 and then hire a calibrator to calibrate the TV on top of that, you are not going to enjoy your experience. And even if you do hire a calibrator, they are calibrating to the same washed reference point. Now, there's no secret here. This channel is crowd and self-funded. You help the channel out if you join for $4.99, but more importantly, you get access to settings like this that show you the difference and what you actually are supposed to get out of your content, imagery, all that good stuff. Now I'm going to show you what the TV looks like before these settings. Okay, so in the professional picture preset, which is the industry standard reference accurate mode, the master calibrated mode that Sony would like to tout around, this is what it's going to look like. If I do the comparison this way, I feel as though we would have a lot of rebuttals and a lot of people complaining that you obviously need to calibrate. It's already been calibrated to reference accuracy, so we need to pick. Either we like reference accuracy and we like getting beaten using reference accuracy against something that uses perceptual accuracy, or we're just not doing that, right? Because I'm going to tell you right now, there's a big difference in what you're looking at between these two displays, and I'm able to get a lot more color not paying attention to that reference accuracy 100%. Okay, so that's the whole point of this, is being creative, understanding your TV, using all the features to draw out the most your TV is capable of, and so on and so forth. So join if you want for $4.99 to be able to see these picture settings on both of these displays. Yes, they are new on the C1. For my C1 guys, rejoice, it hit another level. That being said, we're going to continue and keep it going. So just like that, back from the morgue comes the Sony A95L. So as you can clearly see, I'm pretty sure we want to do the comparison this way versus using the out-of-the-box reference-accurate professional mode that doesn't really look very good and honestly wouldn't win at any visual awards with an actual person versus computer software. So that being said, we're going to continue forward with the comparison in this way. Now, one of the things that I do notice is that the LG C1 just does better with gradations and color in general, as we can see more detail in things like the beard, the armor. The colors just look richer and better on the LG C1. Sony, however, is blasting off with more impressive highlight detail on things like the shoulder, the little collar area around the neck to the armor. Those things are going to have a stronger highlight, in turn giving a little bit more impact in that way, but it does tend to lack the color accuracy and purity that we have on the C1. Now in this example, we can see that Sony is blasting off highlights that the LG doesn't have the ability to blast off, giving a certain level of contrast that just doesn't exist on the C1. However, the C1 isn't doing terrible. As you can clearly see, colors are beautiful, but they're just not on that Sony level where we're seeing that level of contrast separation, which is huge. And it gives you those tight lines around objects, giving a more three-dimensional look, which Sony is nailing in this example. Now, here they look a little bit more like for like, and at a glance it'd be very hard to notice which one was the Sony and which one wasn't. Now, again, the Sony is easily able to be identified when you know what to look for, which is, again, strong contrast, tight lines around the subject, particularly when we talk about around the outline of the character, separating the foreground from the background. That creates that isolation, that bokeh effect that we love so much. This has it way stronger, which gives it more of an immersive look, and that is what Sony is nailing. It also has just slightly more highlight detail and things like the mask, but again, not so much so that you'd be like, oh my gosh, this is just like a blowout. Again, a little extra highlight here at the bottom that, again, the LG does not have as well. So then when we look at examples like this, it gets very interesting, because this is where I'm noticing the biggest shift. Skin tones are virtually identical, though there is a slight edge to the LG in terms of clarity. And I didn't expect the clarity part, because Sony with the XR processor is supposed to be more detailed, but they really dropped the ball with that this year. And I'm seeing it clearly. I've saw it against the Samsung. Now I'm seeing it here with the LG. Sony has to either patch this thing or figure something else out with the way they're rendering sharpness, because this is not it. It's getting beaten in the sharpness area, which I did not expect. Now, I'm sure there's a way you can max out all the sharpness settings to pretend like this isn't so, but this is definitely the case when you rock it at regular settings. Now, that being said, we can notice a couple different things. The highlight in the window in the background coming through way stronger on the LG C1, so we have that juicy highlight. But again, we're losing the kind of detail that the Sony is able to provide in this scene, where we're seeing all the rays of light come in on the Sony in the same window. So it's not that any one of them are doing anything wrong. It's just preferentially, what do you actually like? So in the next example, we can see again another like-for-like comparison to where they are actually very tied. It is extraordinarily difficult to pick out which one would be the Quantum Dot OLED here. In fact, if I had to do that, I would struggle in a blind test. I would struggle so hard. In fact, I would think that the LG C1 would be the OLED or the QD OLED, because when you look at the armor, it's just, you have way more color here on the shoulder, you have way more color here in the hair, and then you just have a little bit more in the way of highlight detail in her little shoulder dress, her little cape thing, whatever you want to call it, right? It's just, there's more purity and accuracy behind the color coming off on the LG C1, where again, Sony is not hitting at that level. Now, don't get me wrong, Sony is a clear picture, but again, it is just not enough to justify in this particular example, and they do look entirely way too similar to the point of me thinking that they are a total tie. Now, again, that's not the case in every example. LG's biggest weakness on the C1 is the color red. And typically, in general, LG doesn't really do very good with reds unless you get up to something like the LG G3 or C3 or something like that. But for the C1 totally is going to still struggle with the color red, even though it's an upgrade from the C10, where, again, it was just totally broken. So now we can look at the differences in the color red, and we can see, it's just, you probably can't see this on YouTube, but I'm telling you, if you look at it in person, comparatively, Sony's going to have the better red every day of the week. But if we remove the color red and we look at every other color in the scene, it is an honest to goodness tie. And LG kind of pulls ahead a little bit in contrast around the window and around her hand area and things of that nature, the little straps in the back. They pull ahead in other areas where they lack just one color, which is why we can't just give Sony everything just because they do one primary color better. Don't get me wrong, it's a primary color, which is huge, but again, every other color as a result on LG looks every bit as good as the Sony. And I mean every bit as good, so that's where this becomes a little more challenging. So then we look at this example, and again, we see strong contrast and skin tones, and again, it's starting to tell a story. The contrast coming off of the C1 is just undeniable, to the point where it does just have that really clear, punchy look to it, to the point of, again, looking a lot closer to what a QD OLED would look like, making it very hard to determine which one would be the QD OLED in this example. Again, the only real benefit that Sony is adding in this example is going to be highlight detail, the peak brightness overall, where LG, again, dimmer by comparison. And this example, again, you can see more of the same of what I'm talking about. The highlight detail on Amber Heard is just stronger. You can see way more over here, to the point where, again, that highlight, so much better. LG looks very dim by comparison, but again, the colors are pretty much so on point that it, again, would be hard to notice. Again, red does fall behind what we have on the Sony A95L to the left, but again, not by a terrible bunch. And again, every other color by comparison is, again, pretty much bang on. So then we start to see a little bit more of a story kind of coming together here of it being a total tie, because when you look at images like this, and they look so incredibly similar, like, again, another toss-up, you would have a hard time picking out the Quantum Dot OLED here. I most certainly would. Again, the only advantage being the brightness on the Sony. It gets to a point, though, where it's just kind of ridiculous, though, because what we're watching in real time is something that costs $3,000 go up against something that does not cost $3,000, and on sale at one point was, what, $999? So $1,000 versus something that's literally 3 times the price. That is ridiculous. And this is from 2021, folks. The TV to the right is discontinued. So I'm not selling this TV to the right, okay? I have no reason to lie to you, to make it look better. There's no cutout, or there's no commission, there's nothing, right? And the reason I point this out is because there's affiliate marketing on YouTube, and the game works like this. Every year a new TV comes out, they're going to talk up the new model, tell you how great it is, and they're going to conveniently slap a link down somewhere in their video or bio or whatever so you can buy it. That gives them a cut, okay? Commission. They make money. Great. Good for them. Pay your mortgage. I don't care. But as far as transparency, it hurts us as consumers because we don't know what the hell to buy. So for me, I put it out there by telling you this is a discontinued TV. I would be a fucking fool to try to sell you a discontinued TV over a brand new TV if my goal was to make money via affiliate marketing. But I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to tell you the truth. They both are tying right now. I have no vested interest in either one winning or losing. I'm doing this so that you have information and then you can make an actual educated decision on what you are going to buy versus not buy based on the truth. And honestly speaking, in this example, they just look like a damn tie. And it's mind-blowing to me, really it is. This is the most fascinating part of doing TV comparisons. Because you see examples like this, where this crazy explosion happens, and you would think the Quantum Dot OLED would look better, but instead, the LG pulls ahead. With the most vibrant orange, the most vibrant red, and it's starting to look like the actual Quantum Dot OLED, but it's WOLED. From 2021. Sony to the left is just, it's over bright. It's overly bright. They found a highlight. They're trying to juice it up. It's diluting the color. They're not adding enough color because they go for that muted down quotation mark cinema look, which isn't really cinema because some cinemas are more vibrant than this. It gets to a point where it's just like you lose your patience when you start to see what's going on here. It's like, yeah, the new tech is being touted as the greatest, but it's not necessarily the greatest when compared to something that, again, just like a couple years ago, this thing was a champion of champions kicking all kinds of ass, and it's still doing that. And if you have something like the C1 and you're hearing how Quantum Dot's the cutting edge, Sony is embarrassing the name of Quantum Dot OLED. I'm sorry to say, because they're not outperforming a WOLED, which is ridiculous, to the point where it's like, I'm going to tell you that. Now, unlike the LG C1, the Sony is able to maintain its peak brightness when things get pretty bright. So you'll notice even in this example, the beard of Endeavor is going to just be brighter than it's going to be on the LG C1. Counteractively, you can notice the flame coming out of the elbows, way brighter on the Sony A95L to the left. Now, this does create more of an immersion as we get to these kinds of scenes where, again, LG, it just dims down way too much to the point where it's just not even fun because you're losing the core of a highlight that matters, and that highlight is, again, that explosive bang of fire, which, again, is very bright. This example will probably show you a lot more of what I'm talking about. The LG is just way too dim right now in this particular example, and it just, you lose the immersive effect of the lighter shades of yellow and white that would be in a fire explosion, or a fiery explosion rather. So again, Sony pulling ahead for these kinds of scenes, again, just maintaining it a lot better. And again, it's not to say that LG doesn't have the ability to get bright, because they do, like in scenes like this, they get bright. But again, Sony is going to take the cake here because they just have the extra kick in the eyes, the highlights around that kind of thing. So again, skin tone's also looking better on the A95L for this particular example. Not by a lot in person, by a touch, by a hair, but it is better, and better is better. But again, as we get to different scenes, it's going to trade. Now, the C1 looks way better. Even though it's not as bright as the Sony is just tossing out a really bright lightning bolt with no real color behind it, where the C1 is tossing out semi-brightness compared to the LG, or to the A95L to the left. But it's doing it in a way where you have hues that wrap around the actual bolt itself, and it just looks more like a lightning flash. Again, you can notice things like the goggles, way more colorful, way more realistic here. The skin tones are better preserved, right? Hair is better preserved in all of this. It's just a more preserved image, a richer image by comparison. And that is very important as we talk about, again, these high brightness scenes. Now, again, it's not to say that Sony isn't producing a beautiful image. This is a beautiful image to the left, for sure. But to the right, it's just richer. And that richness can be felt as you start to see more and more things play out, more and more explosions, so on and so forth. Now again, similarly, when you have embers like in this scene, you're going to notice that it just looks better on the A95L because it's just giving you that extra peak brightness. But again, like I was saying earlier, every other color by comparison, though, looks identical. It's very, very hard to find the Quantum Dot OLED here. Like, it's very hard. You're probably going to have a hard time on camera trying to figure it out. because of how like dynamic both images look. And that's the beauty of this whole thing. It's like you're able to see something that honestly you would not have seen otherwise if you were just to go with out of the box settings or just listen to turn this off or turn that off and don't try to do anything with your TV. Like, these TVs are capable of more, and I'm seeing it here. Now, we have to give credit where credit's due. Sony is pulling ahead in this example in terms of the color purple. Looks way more realistic, way more accurate. LG, way more cool. I don't think that should surprise anyone, though, because this is where we're seeing the quantum dot filtering actually benefit the Sony, where LG doesn't have that capability, so colors can't be quite as accurate sometimes. So, we have this example as well, where again, very identical, almost impossible to see any real difference whatsoever between the two in the images outside of, again, brightness. That is a massive win for the WOLED technology and what LG created. When I'm looking at an image going up against a quantum dot OLED and I'm actually genuinely struggling to see a tangible difference of any kind whatsoever between these two TVs, especially given the disparaging price difference of one, again, being $3,000 to the left, A95L, and the right, not being anything more than $1,000, that is a massive, massive difference in price and in quality. And again, same thing. This example hits the screen. I cannot tell a difference hardly at all between these two pictures. And now it's right down to even colors. Even red, I don't really notice any real difference. They look so similar. And in fact, there are areas where the C1 is kind of pulling ahead in some of those subtle shades, again, of orange and things like that, that again, is not really being picked up on with the A95L. So it's just, it goes back and forth, but ultimately speaking, they are just way too incredibly similar. Again, like in examples like this, skin tone's going to be better, brightness is going to be better, but is that $3,000 better? In my opinion, the answer is no. I don't see $3,000 going into this thing, again, comparatively going up against the LG C1 at all. Because while the C1 lacks the juicy highlight like we're getting right now, all around, it also lacks that reason to pay more. You know, like the Sony lacks the reason to pay more. The LG is right there. It's like in this scene, again, another example of I can't tell who the QD OLED is. It lacks. It really does lack that. Like you can pick it out. Now on camera, you're going to notice things like the pants and the suit being like over here, this is going to be way warmer. Over here, this is going to be way cooler. It's going to be overly exaggerated on camera to the point where you probably can pick it out and say, oh, that's the WOLED, but in person, I'm looking at it. I'm telling you what I'm seeing. It's good luck. You're going to have such a hard time doing this. You can see the warmth of the Sony a lot more than you can on the WOLED when you really squint your eyes, but that's just it. At this point, we're squinting and we're ultra nitpicking and things of that nature. And again, the only thing that I'm noticing that Sony is really beating LG at is the highlight throw, but honestly, not even that, because it's intelligently placed. It makes sense. They both are just so damn comparable. And again, scene after scene, doesn't matter what you look at, Sony's biggest claim to fame right now is that they're just brighter, but not that the color is better. And that, for me, was the shock. That is the win, and that is ultimately why they do tie, because dare I say it, man, LG really figured something out with the C1, and they're hanging in there with the absolute best of the best of the best. So that being said, I do want to hear what you guys have to say about this comparison, because honestly, this one kind of shocked me. I thought that we would see a more aggressive showing for Sony at the least, but no, like even in this example, it's identical yet again, and it's starting to get to the point where it gets redundant. It's like, okay, everything just looks very similar. I'm having a very hard time seeing any real difference between these two outside of brightness. The highlights are coming in way stronger on the Sony, but the colors are pretty much identical, so that means it is a tie. But that being said, I want to know what you guys think in the comments down below. As always, I want to thank you guys so much for watching the #1 brand in honesty, and until the next video, I will see you guys later.